Hello, hello. Today's show will be all about healing today, how healing, energy healing, and science dovetails, how our galactic guides are involved in all this. Stay tuned. It's going to be a fabulous show.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain. Always a blessing to be with you all again. And remember, we are streaming live throughout the United States and Canada on syndicated radio on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM. We're also streaming on Twitter, on the UFO Paranormal Twitter. There's not a lot of followers on there, so if you want to support us on the Twitterverse, which is now called X, what do we call it? The Xverse? I guess we'll always call it Twitter, and Facebook and YouTube and my Rumble channel. So if you want to say hi, I'd love to hear your comments there. Today, we're going to talk all about energy healing and how this dovetails with our galactic Star Nation family and mainstream science with Dr. Jean Ang. Welcome to the show, Jean.
Thank you. Thank you. So great. Glad to be here. I love the title of the show, Accentuate the Positive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a teaching as well as the title of the show. I actually started on radio on normal radio, on community radio about 15 years ago. And I'm thinking, what can I call it that a mainstream mind would understand? Instead of calling it conscious, cosmic consciousness or something a bit more woo-woo, I tried to make it more understandable to a mainstream mind. I think we can all understand accentuating the positive, which is, very wise teaching. It's actually an old song from the 30s and 40s, an old jazz song. Have you ever heard it?
Oh, no, I haven't heard it.
One of our telcos, it's in the beginning, one of our telcos used it for their ads years ago, and it's sort of a catchy tune. They sort of jazzed it up to make it more modern. But yeah, it's an old song from church, I think. Yeah, anyway, I won't go into it. But I was just saying to Jean, his real name is Eugenius Ang, but he shortens it to Jean, and I'm like, I love your name. It's got genius, Eugenius. And I think Jean must be a bit of a genius. Let me tell you a little bit about him and what we're going to chat about today. So Jean Ang, Ph.D., received his BA from Stanford in human biology, philosophy, and religious studies, and was formally trained as a neurobiologist at Yale. Is that right? Neurobiologist?
Yes.
Where he earned his doctorate in basic mechanisms of how the brain develops, followed by a post-doctoral fellowship on how ultrasound can affect the developing cerebral cortex. So is it a good effect or a bad effect, ultrasound, on the developing cerebral cortex?
Bad effect if you do too much.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I bet the doctors don't like that. After his postdoctoral fellowship, Jean decided to step into the role of facilitator of healing in order to directly interact with and helping people. Most of his work centers around the use of subtle energy to help align the subtle energy bodies, its channels, meridians, and energy centers to help restore balance and harmony so healing can occur, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, and or spiritual. Jean doesn't see himself as a healer, I love this, but simply as part of the interconnectedness that occurs when facilitator, client, and or source energy, he's got source, love, God, interact to bring about healing and restoration. He sees his teaching engagements and seminars as an extension of this interaction occurring on multiple dimensions to bring wholeness, understanding, and evolution to all involved. And he was saying, Jen was just telling me before we went live, that he was out in Australia at the beginning of the year, but it's before I had connected with him. And I'm like, Drats, I missed you, because he was teaching some of his healing techniques to us Aussies down under, up over in Brisbane, which is above me. It's about a day's drive away from me. Jean has had a healing practice in Oregon County, California, CA California, and sees clients for a number of healing and shamanic practices. In addition, Jean teaches seminars focusing on the integration of science, spirituality, and healing, and travels both in the United States and internationally, as I said, doing sessions and workshops, particularly around his Arcturian Healing Method, the InterGalactic Method, and the 5 Force Healing Method, modalities he created as a synthesis of his studies in healing. And your website, Jean, is arcturianhealingmethod.com.
Yes, that's great. Thanks. Thanks.
So as I said, we were chatting before we went live. So straight out the gate from high school, you went to university to study philosophy and biology. What were you thinking at the time? Like, were you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Basically, like a pre-med kind of curriculum, but in liberal arts. And I was lucky enough to be able to go to Stanford, which is a beautiful place. If everyone has been there, it's great to go just to visit Northern California and that university. Very open university, rigorous. And I think the energy there just, I wasn't really tuned into that language, but I think we're all intuitively psychic. The California, maybe it's because of the fault line, it has a very open type of land energy, which I think facilitates an openness in one's energy field. So even though I was sort of really dead set, very academically focused, I think it opened up a lot of different, maybe we call them codes now, soul codes within me. So actually by my sophomore year, I was really going through a deep spiritual awakening. And I think it was a lot to do with kind of that milieu in California, in the land, actually, more so than any, organized or people interaction directly in the beginning.
Yeah. The first person I saw when I was on my awakening journey to attempt to integrate energy healing with the more mainstream allopathic mindset was Deepak Chopra, who had, grew up with this rich spiritual life and thought it was all sort of old-fashioned, stuff, and went to the States and studied science and then had this full circle moment where he came back to his roots, really. But within his scientific community, they were like saying he'd gone mad, he was woo-woo. What about you? Like coming out of that mainstream mindset into more expansive, how was your journey through that?
Yeah. I'll go into a little bit more in depth where it might be interesting, some interesting topics to bring up around that. But just speaking synchronistically, I remember around my sophomore year where I was going through this kind of deep spiritual awakening where, many people here probably have experienced that, where the ground sort of is being pulled out under you from what you're used to. Deepak Chopra actually came to the Stanford bookstore, and I remember kind of like, looking for answers. And I remember sort of like, asking him about, what to do. I'm here trying to, be a pre-med and, and all of reality is kind of changing. But, one of the instigators for me was actually being introduced to A Course in Miracles, which is kind of an independent study. I didn't really get into working with anyone else, just kind of doing it on my own. But the workbook really did transform my perception, to really open me up. So I would say that would be the first awakening. And so that was around my sophomore year. So pretty, everyone has their own soul path, but I would say early on, it might have been more easier, although any awakening is not easy in a sense. But when you're trying to establish yourself, in the world, like you are maybe right after in your 20s and so forth, it sometimes can be a little disorienting. So I went through that for about 3 years, was still pretty much on that kind of scientific path. And then learned a lot from that internally, but then went to, like you mentioned there, to a PhD program for neurobiology. And these were all areas, I think, what I was trying to integrate was sort of a deep intuition. I was interested in psychology. Basically, I would call it consciousness. We might call it spirituality or soul healing. So I was trying to take that inner interest and put it into something that was maybe accepted in the world, more traditional in the world, whether that be a physician or a scientist or even a psychologist. So I kind of took a balance with neuroscience or neurobiology, which still had that, you could call it hardcore rigor from the scientific world, with the possibility to still maybe satisfy my interest in consciousness, even psychic phenomena or soul healing. So I completed that. It took about 5 years to complete the PhD. And then usually you go into a postdoctoral fellowship if you stay in academia. So I did that, but I was already pretty much, there were openings also in the greater world, greater society, so that I could maybe eventually move out. And so after I finished my postdoctoral fellowship, I did actually step, almost like most people would see it as like a 180-degree turn, because I went directly into basically energy healing. And so often I would hold classes on what I understood between healing and science. But maybe I'll pause there. But that kind of was a big portion of kind of the journey, was up to that point.
So was your spiritual awakening an ever, more questioning and curiosity? Like, did you fall into meditation and have some awareness occur, or like what occurred? Or were you just asking questions like, what more, what more?
Yeah, it was a combination of that, but it really happened during that work with the Course in Miracles.
Right.
There was a kind of a you could call it, like we have sometimes these visions or kind of deep psychic experiences. And before I was right maybe a week before I was introduced to the Course in Miracles, I was back in the Stanford bookstore, which may have a vortex there or something. But I had this, I was looking through like the self-help section, and which I just was interested because of psychology, on break, preparing for finals. And I found a book, and it said The Course in Miracles. I had never heard of that book, which, a lot of people around the world I have. And I had this vision that I would be doing one of the hardest things that I would do in this life, and that this was the reason I had come onto the planet, like one of the main reasons. That, you just kind of have these like internal psychic visions. And then a week later, I was introduced to that book by all people, my high school tennis coach. And it really was, those 3 years of doing the course were one of the hardest things that I did in this life, just because of the change around and like you said, questioning reality, questioning, who I was I a body? There's a lot of different perceptual changes that can occur if you do, I think, the workbook in particular of that spiritual path.
Of the Course in Miracles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember when I was young, I was up at near Mullumbimby, where my daughter is living now, and there's a huge, well, it's huge now, it wasn't then, but it's called the Crystal Castle, plug to the crystal, but it's a huge garden full of Buddhas and crystals and paths, and oh my God, it's the most spectacular place. Anyway, they have a bookshop, they sell crystals and books, and they have healers working there. And I was attracted to this book that had Barbara Ann Brennan's book, The Hands of Light. Have you read that book?
Yeah.
And I remember standing in a queue waiting to purchase it, and I had these shivers run down through my body, like this will be, because I didn't know who I was or what I was here to do at that time. I was young, in my 20s, and like, this will be a part of who you are. Yeah, and that teaching of who we are as subtle energy, I think, is so important. It's been completely missed, in the Western allopathic healing system or sick system. It's been completely missed. I had a doctor on my show about 15 years ago when I was on radio, community radio, who talked about how in every other system across the world, energy is introduced. Like the Chinese have the meridians, the acupuncture, and the Indians, and But in the medical model, in the Western medical model, energy is not entertained at all. What do you want to say about that, Jean?
Yeah, we kind of lost that, what they call the vitalist theory. This
Right.
was in the past where if you believe that there was life force, that's an old paradigm. And now we're just kind of like, mechanics, or like down to the
Right.
nanomolecule now. Right. And I think there is a revival. I think there is coming, like kind of how meditation and yoga maybe 30 years ago was, sort of just one or two places you never heard of. And now maybe at major cities, you can see a yoga or meditation studio. And I think like energy healing is sort of following in its wake for that kind of openness for at least society, modern society. Whether the allopathic medical field will actually ever put that into the sort of paradigm, I'm not sure, but they'll probably, because of societal interest, there'll be some aspect, maybe they refer out to practitioners who are, more kind of focused on that, expert at that with that paradigm. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, because absolutely. I mean, miracles. I've seen absolute what we call miracles in my own life, being a practitioner of energy medicine, and even when I was studying, because Jean and I were chatting before we went live about studying different healing modalities. And when I was in my 30s, I was doing a lot of different healing modalities. And a lot of it was psychic work. And I had said to my guides, I want to see something with my physical eyes, like something with my eyes, because often we're going inside the body and working on the subtle energies and like looking inside the body. And we're seeing it with our inner eye, but not the outer eyes. And so the universe gave me an opportunity to see something with my physical eyes when my young daughter, she's in her 30s now, she was a kid, about 11, cut her foot badly out in the garden on a rock or a broken pipe or something. And she came I was in the shower at the time, came in screaming, blood and dirt everywhere. And I remember she was in such a panic and screaming. My thought was, I just got to stop the bleeding. And maybe that will stop her. That will shut her up. That will stop her screaming. So I sort of threw her on the top of the lid of the toilet and put my hands on her foot and commanded a healing. And what I noticed instantly was I was expecting to feel the warmth of the blood like oozing under my hand, but I didn't feel anything. So I took my hand off and the cut had sealed, instantly sealed, gone. And we both stood there. I'm dripping wet and naked. She's on the top of the seat of the toilet. We're just like staring at her foot. What just happened? So yeah, my guides gave me that opportunity to see something with my outside eyes by using the power of our mind, like that command of healing. And yeah, it was quite amazing. I haven't seen a lot of that since, but yeah, it was quite amazing. What about you, Jean? What have you seen with the healings?
Yeah, it reminds me because one of the most popular short classes that I started to hold, of course, guided by, I love your term, the mob, your higher team, was something called quantum spoon bending. Maybe you saw me in some videos there, but people were very interested in that in the psychic field since the 70s and 80s, and Uri Geller. But someone showed me like an energy technique to do it, and I just sort of used it as a way to introduce people to energy where you could actually see it happen in the physical world, just like you're healing physically. And when I did it, of course, I was already into energy. I didn't really need a proof, but you can take a pretty hard piece, like one that you couldn't bend physically, like whether it's a utensil or a piece of metal, and you just put like white light chi into it. That's the first technique, and it gets soft at some point. And when you bend that down, you realize, whoa, something has changed. Like my laws of physics has just changed, because what happens is there's only a short window where that becomes soft, and then it comes hard again. And the thing is, like Uri Geller was great to bring that out. I think he shifted consciousness, but I think he was the one doing it. Like when you are the one taught to do it, whether you believe in energy or not, and you kind of get that feeling, oh, this got soft, then it starts to, just like your experience, shift something inside you. You come back and, because energy healing sometimes will take some time based on how complex the person who's receiving it is.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
but this is sort of like a nice way, even for experienced energy healers, to kind of have a way to show people in the physical world how subtle energy can work. So a lot of people have that aha, and I had it, of course, when I first learned it, because I used a piece that I couldn't bend physically, and it, we put loops in it and so forth in the the middle of the fork. And so I think something like that, really, those aha moments can really shift you. And my thought was, if people do believe in guides and like their higher dimensional assistants, they particularly when you first learn an energy modality, that's what I've noticed, is that they'll give you, or maybe it's your higher self, a very physicalized result. It might be one or two, just to let you know, like, to get
Yes.
that part of your brain, because that's where we are with most modern societies, like, what's in the 3D world is real. It's hard to
Yeah.
overcome fully that thought form, even if you're very spiritual in this day and age. And so you get that from your guides, and then you can get to the more maybe important work, which is more subtle, or I
Yes.
won't say more important, but get to some deeper work also that might be more subtle.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that happened to me because I requested it. Like, I want to see something. I want you to prove to me that this is working with my physical eyes. But I'm not somebody who works in a hospital and works with people that are bleeding. And so I only ever saw that the once. I have seen other things happen. I remember being at a party at a wedding and someone he fell over and gashed his face. And I had a few drinks and I just took him upstairs and cleaned him up and I stitched it up psychically and it closed.
Wow. Nice.
I was doing it sort of half drunk. It's like, oh, what are we going to do with this guy? I don't want to call an ambulance because he's having too much fun. I'll just stitch it up psychically. But it's not a common occurrence, I have to say, because it's not my lifestyle to see people bleeding and stuff. But yeah, and I wonder if it could be a common occurrence, for people working in that sort of situation, where people are bleeding and stuff like that. Maybe in the future, Gene.
Yeah, I think so. It's more of consciousness, and like kind of the modern society is open to that, just kind of that collective force field, or the collective consciousness. Like in India, where maybe they already have thousands of years of belief, like you said, in chi and prana, and in direct materialization, maybe from certain teachers or gurus or high saints. It's easier for that to happen actually in that environment. Whereas because of the thought form of the collective there, but the thought form of collective, which is very, very three-dimensional, even if a very strong practitioner, sometimes there's only so much that can come through, not because of the practitioner's consciousness, but the collective thought form of the particular environment. So I think as we're changing, I love this radio station all over, like you said, it's changing consciousness on so many levels of the humanity. So then I think more phenomena can materialize, healing, UFO phenomena for just everyday people. Like, not, you don't have to do anything too special to have it show up if you're receptive.
Yeah, things are changing dramatically, aren't they? I mean, Michelle, who manages the station, sent me my stats last week. We're getting almost, 250,000 people listening. And I want to say hi to everybody who's listening, not just on the live streams, but through the syndicated radio station. So yeah, the audience for this conversation is growing, and it's so great that you're tuning into this sort of conversation. The collective, the critical mass, the collective consciousness, because I've been podcasting and on radio for, as I say, over 15 years, the exponential growth in this conversation on those platforms like YouTube, more and more podcasters and Spotify and all those platforms talking about, aliens and Arcturians and healing, energy healing and spirituality and near-death experiences and all that sort of thing. But yeah, how were you introduced, Dean, to your Star Nation family? Because you call your work the Arcturian Healing Method. So you're obviously in touch with the Arcturians. We had the Arcturians on the show last week as well. Love the Arcturians.
Yeah, they're getting popular.
How did they introduce themselves to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's very synchronistic also. So I mentioned, so I was finishing up my postdoc, And about that last year, I started to study different energy modalities. I first worked with a Russian healer down in Brighton Beach, which is Coney Island. They have a big, strong Russian community there. And he really maybe initiated me, so to speak, into the energy world. His name was Vladimir Maximov. And then I learned a number of other healing modalities, maybe more well-known, trademark, like pranic healing, which was great background and great modality with chakras, and, can heal those wounds like cuts. But I think all that, the reason I bring that up was that introduced me to the energy world, which would allow me to make this step into what I call maybe interdimensional consciousness and beings. And it happened kind of, very mundanely. Like I was actually during this time, which was a heightened time, in my kitchen in, I was in Connecticut, and I just heard my intuitive voice say, like, "You're Arcturian," and I didn't even know what that word meant. Like, but now on retrospect, I kind of went back, after all these years, and realized that right before I started graduate school, I had picked up a book by Joshua David Stone, who's a big ascension writer at that time, maybe 30, 40, 50 books on ascension, who was Arcturian himself. And he must have coded the book actually with, of course, different spiritual writers just by writing it. They're bringing codes through. And it just probably went over my head. Like I probably something like enlightened, awakened star beings. And I was just more interested in the spiritual principles. And I must have gotten encoded by that book, which was maybe, let's say, 6 years prior to this inspiration in the kitchen in Connecticut. So it took that long, to just incubate, because it probably wouldn't have been good if that opened up, when I was in the midst of my Ph.D. studies, which is kind of very intense academically. Yeah. And from that point on, I kept that in mind. And maybe this is a longer conversation, but I'll just bring up some of the high points. So from that point, there were a number of things that awakened that, like opened that code. One was I studied with Stephen Greer. Maybe he's been on the show, or people know about him in the UFO community. I went to some of his trainings to Under the Stars, where you really see these things, these lights under the sky. And I think what those are really encodings. They're transmissions, whether you see anything or not. The star beings or interdimensional beings are bringing in light and information into your field, Yeah. And that shifted my consciousness. The other thing was I read kind of from cover to cover, The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurta. And I think that connected me to certain interdimensional realities and shifted my consciousness kind of from this scientific, even though spiritually oriented framework, to being really multi-dimensional embodied. And then maybe two more things was I got the reconnection done, that process being brought through by Eric Pearl, who was very Palladian oriented. And I think
I've had Eric on the show.
Yeah, I had that feeling, and it really opened up my channels, kind of these fifth dimensional, they call them, these ley lines inside your body. So they, these kind of codes of light inside your body. And then finally, I did a fairly in-depth shamanic training with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. So that was the communication tool. So all this is about 5 years since that time.
Wow.
So I use mostly shamanic journeying to communicate with the Arcturians. So I needed that kind of training of the inner world with the shamanic training.
Wow. Yeah, I've got a question. So we talked about healing. It's like, as humans, we want to make this stuff real. So we want to see stuff with our outside eyes, our physical eyes. So things like miracles and instant healings and stuff like that make us think, okay, so this stuff's real. But the real healing is the inner work. But the question I have for you is, I have a friend who is an incredible galactic being connected to the multiverse and the inner dimensions and all the different dimensions, but she's still in her human trauma over many years of downloading codes and healing works and getting transmissions from her guides and everything. She's still in her human trauma, and I scratch my head and I think, so what is this work doing if it's not alleviating those sort of thought forms of not enoughness and, like she's having relationships and they're all sort of traumatic, and like, what is this coding doing if it's not helping us on that level? Or is it helping us on that level? Like, do you want to untangle that? how does it all work?
I think that's a really important question. Yeah, because, like, kind of having been here now, maybe in the field for 12, 15 or so years now. So that was about 2008, when that kind of time in the kitchen, or 2007. And I think, yeah, with the downloads and so forth, I like to use that dimensional model, like I use a 7-dimensional model, physical, like we have a physical, etheric, emotional, mental, causal, which is more your karmic body, spiritual, your soul body, Akashic records, and then your divine body, which would be like your non-dual oneness with source. So we're all of that. And like what you're pointing out is, I think you get these downloads, and maybe they're coming in, they're coding you, they're coding the environment, you're coding others from the higher beings. Maybe they're spiritual, maybe they're karmic, maybe some of them reach down into the etheric, maybe even have a physical change. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to actually heal up, let's say, some of the emotional traumas, these samskaras in the astral body. So, or like, for example, you get a download, this is maybe more of contrast. It doesn't mean you're going to be a good marathon runner or a good bodybuilder or strong physically. You still got to go to the gym. You still got to go run some laps or some miles or kilometers to build up your physical body. So I think there's only so much a coding can do. So, going back to the emotional body, because I think people would identify that you're not going to all of a sudden from a coding become, much stronger physically unless you go to the gym. So same thing astrally, in the emotional, you can get so much change. But I think if you have deep scars, deep traumas, that could help, but you probably still need to do a little focused work on that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I was a part of a conference. Actually, did I say this at the beginning? I heard about Jean through Jules Arnaz, who put on the Being Superhuman conference at the beginning of the year, and she was talking about you, and I'm like, well, let me check him out. Yeah, that was like ages ago. That was just maybe before you came to Australia, or just before you came to Australia. Wish I'd known you were down under, but anyway, you were in a different city. But so I was on a conference where lots of activations were happening, a lot of people doing a lot of activations. And then when it came to my turn to talk, I usually, I always just channel. The conversation was about healing your emotional trauma. It wasn't so much about activations. And what it said to me was, like, you can activate and have remembrance, like you can broaden your awareness of who you are as a multidimensional, spiritual, galactic being. But yeah, you still have to do the work with the subconscious programming that is traumatizing you. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Like the separation bias that we have as humans. You still have to do the work on that level, even though you could be activated to remember who you are. Like a lot of people who have NDEs know that they are one with Source and God, but they come back into their human life, and now they've got to deal with life, people ridiculing them, saying it's not true, and dealing with the judgment and, how you respond to that. Yeah. So we still have to do that work on that level, right, Jean?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, even like, you might have a Qigong practitioner, or maybe they're called master, and they're really masters of the etheric body. But whether you've met that, or that's you, or that's me, if they haven't worked on their emotional body, they could still be quite maybe even abusive. Maybe they were a martial artist, and their chi body is like, out of this world. It's not, no one's going to be able to compete with that chi, like a power lifter chi body, but if they haven't worked on, maybe loving kindness, which is maybe an emotional, mental, aspect, you can be kind of imbalanced in those bodies. And maybe the goal is to try to at least be aware of where we are at each of those levels. Whatever the model you're using.
Yeah. With a lot of the activations that happen through energy healing, what happens is that the expansion of awareness makes you more aware of who you are as someone carrying these ideas and beliefs in not feeling good enough. And so your emotional pain anyway, and physical pain can increase until you do deal with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until you start changing what you believe about yourself.
Yeah, I think that is that purification process, that ongoing one, or this awareness, because there's also the opposite, is someone could actually be, like you said, in non-dual awareness continuously. There probably is some of the cleaning of the bodies, but it's possible that
Yeah.
some of the bodies, other bodies, lower bodies, like the like having a romantic relationship, someone could pause that and become completely develop their, let's say, spiritual divine body, so they're completely like in non-dual state, but they really haven't kind of worked that tug of war between when you have learning in an emotional, a romantic relationship. It's possible. I think it's possible. Maybe it's happened. So yeah, so I think it's helpful to kind of try to experience all the bodies, learn at all those levels.
Yeah. What do you think is the most important part of energy healing? If someone is going to look into it, maybe they're feeling emotional pain or they have physical pain, what do you think is the most important part, or is all of it equally as important?
Hmm. Yeah, well, the way I thought about it, and maybe I'll get to the specific answer of what you were saying, but kind of in the context of our talk, was I saw the energy healing. The reason I mentioned that right before the Arcturian sort of communication to me, that I had learned these certain energy modalities like pranic healing and working with the Russian energy healer, was that is like a bridge to the interdimensional world from three-dimensional consciousness. So, like, let's say you start out, maybe you're a scientist, an engineer, a business person, like myself, like my history, but you're very three-dimensional because that was just happened to be your upbringing. So, if you were to try to jump to like in a direct experience of, let's say, the Arcturians or even
Hmm.
an angelic being, it's like there's
Hmm.
a gap there. There's a gap of embodiment that's going to be a little bit tricky to do. And so, if you can't jump the gap, you either fall back to your 3D and say it's all fooey, or you have some kind of breakdown experience to because it's such a big wide opening into this other dimensions, that you're going to have to heal up to get there. Maybe psychedelics do that because it's a kind of accelerated path into the opening the interdimensional worlds. But then if you haven't kind of had some of these embodiment experiences in the energy world or the etheric body, you might need to kind of go back to integrate that, so that these two worlds, the three-dimensional and this new dimensional reality, higher dimensional reality, makes sense. Like, you can still drive a car, pay your taxes, have a family, while you could still be talking to Syrians in a kind of coherent way. um, so I think, back to your question, I think if you learn energy healing, chakras, channels, chi, and you start to really see like, oh, this is real, whether it's spoon bending or you get a direct healing like you showed, that's very physically oriented, and then you also take the next step where you do distance healing, and
Hmm.
you not just theoretically, but you realize, I can really heal someone from a distance.
Yep.
That
Hmm.
When you get to that step where it becomes a knowing, not just intellectual, it has to maybe start intellectually. Then the higher beings, because I think there's a two-way conversation going on, they're kind of watching, I think, because they don't want to destabilize your reality. Like, that was my perception, and I kind of was reading some other people's experiences and psychics and channelers saying sometimes the interdimensional beings, they've been trying to stay in the background, because if they really show up, they could really destabilize a person, and then
Uh-huh.
then they're not helping at all, because it's just too much of a big step. And so I think that bridge was energy healing. I'll just pause there. I know it wasn't the direct answer to your question, but I thought that was an important part of the process.
Yeah, look, a lot of people come to energy healing through the Reiki portal. It was
Hmm.
one of my first, I think I was studying as a naturopath in my early 20s, and energy healing wasn't a part of the curriculum, but then somebody said, oh, come and do this weekend Reiki course. So it was my introduction into energy. And it seems to continue. People are still using that Reiki portal to be introduced to thinking about life in terms of energy, and not just, on that physical level. What herbs can I take? What diet can I be on? What drugs can I take?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But,
Mm-hmm.
what was I going to say? There was something else I was going to say about that. No, lost my train of thought. I'll let you keep going. Yeah, coming to energy healing. No, nothing. Anyway, I got too much into the Reiki story. Oh, yeah, that's right. I won't mention her name, but she was she taught people about psychic awareness, and she had a lot of cards, and people will know, and she became a born-again Christian, and she renounced all her teachings before. And she's now this kind of Christian. But what she does is she gets online, instead of talking about the love of God, she just talks about, like, she was just damning Reiki, saying it was a product of the devil. And instead of promoting love and light, she calls herself a Christian, and she's just making everybody else wrong, including herself, for like making millions of dollars teaching people about connecting to angels and being psychic and selling many books and cards. It's crazy. And what I have also seen, Jean, in my many years of doing this, is people who are energy practitioners, when the shift hits the fan and they get really sick, like they get a cancer or something, they go into the allopathic model. They do the operation and they have the drugs. Why do you think that is? Is that just the strength of the collective thought form around the allopathic model? There's not enough strength around the energy medicine model. Like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors. I think what you just brought up is a good point, that the model is the morphic field around allopathic medicine is very strong. The other thing, just in a very neutral way, is if something has hit the physical body, energy healing, I think, is very powerful, and depending on the practitioner and maybe the openness of their channel and maybe the karmic connection of being able to meet someone like that, can really, and your openness, the person who's maybe suffering that condition, can really shift a physical illness like cancer. But sometimes, maybe because it's already physicalized, some type of physical therapy, it doesn't have to go all the way to surgery or radiotherapy, might be helpful. Like, it's now in that dimension of the physical, in addition to all these other higher subtle energy dimensional therapies. So I think it's a combination of the two.
Yeah. So once it's hit the physical, because everything is born in the energy before it's manifested in the denser energy we call physical energy, which is the slower moving energy, right?
Right.
So once it's in that domain, doing something more like a surgery that removes it is helping you on the other levels as well, because now you've seen it as gone, and you can work on your energy body and your emotional body and mental bodies to not have the physical symptoms return. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. And I think each person, it kind of chooses their maybe you call it magic, chooses their avenue for healing. So probably what probably is going to be most comfortable during that time, or like you said, subconsciously, where they're most aligned to, they're going to find those healing channels to bring that through. Maybe it's purely energy healing and higher. Some people might still choose a physical modality.
Yeah. Which is fine. I'm not judging it, because there's fantastic physical modalities out there. But what I find really interesting is that the energy practitioners themselves, they go for the physical. I'm like, really? I mean, one of my favorite, spiritual teachers and energy practitioners, he'd had 7 near-death experiences, and just before he left his body at the end of last year, he did get a leukemia, a cancer, which kind of shocked him. He never thought that he'd get a cancer. And he did go straight into the chemotherapy. He knew he wasn't going to live. Like, his guides had told him, come on, your time's finished. We're trying to get you out of here 7 times. Like, you've got other things to do. So he wasn't afraid of death in any way, but he just wanted to prolong his time here on Earth, because he was so eager to keep teaching as much as he could, keep getting that music out of him as much as he could. So he did choose the allopathic model. Yeah, I mean, it didn't prolong his life or save his life, but he did choose it, which I found a really interesting choice. I don't know. I scratched my head. Would you, Jean? If you got really sick, would you go that route?
Yeah,
I shouldn't ask you that.
That's what I was thinking. That's hard to say. I'm always a very diplomatic person. No, my answer was very diplomatic. But I'd have to be in that situation to give you the best answer, because I know that that would be a challenging situation, definitely.
Yeah. So, with what you're teaching people and seeing, what is the major thing that people are asking from you as clients that come to you for healing? What are you seeing on a collective level?
Yeah, like just like you were saying, I did see someone actually today with something that would be called cancer, possibly. So I do
Right.
see when I think about, maybe like in the last half a year, people who are coming with that kind of diagnosis. A lot of people come for also emotional, mental healing, also spiritual, monetary sort of wealth, abundance type
Yeah.
of work. Those are more the private healings. And then, of course, I'm doing a lot of the work just holding kind of online classes or in-person classes. And that's more with the training for the kind of channeling the different Arcturian frequencies.
Yeah. So, what I'm seeing with you is maybe your work is more as a teacher of this work so that it spreads through the collective and critical mass makes it more available to humanity. Maybe that's like the direction of your work rather than the one-on-one healings, because how many people can a healer see one-on-one? But teaching a group of people or a class to hold this knowledge, to hold the knowledge is greatly spreading it through the unconscious mind and the conscious minds of the human collective, right?
Yeah, well, I really resonated with what you said. Your team on our conversation before had said about people taking, the healing class we had mentioned,
Classes,
kind of just holding that level of consciousness.
right?
And then I was thinking about the work that I've been doing and so forth. And I think a lot of that is to, we each are contributing to this movement of consciousness, making it more open. And a lot of that work is not only the people, actually, probably it's like an iceberg. The people you see, of course, are getting mostly maybe a very direct exposure. They're probably
Mm-hmm.
ripe to be very multidimensional of themselves, of others. And I think back to your question about what I think to take away from energy healing, because I was saying it was a bridge, which wasn't exactly the question, like for an individual. But I think it when it comes down to it, it makes you realize your interdependence, because the 3D model makes you feel like I'm just right here.
Yeah,
Once
yeah,
you experience any of energy work, like I take this pen and I realize I'm putting a lot of chi into this pen. Someone who holds this pen probably could pick up some ideas about who I am, psychometrize it. So,
yeah,
it's not just so, but when you start to realize that we're all connected by this etheric field, but not intellectually, but kind of directly from energy work, I think the consciousness starts to make a huge shift. And that's a big, I think, a big takeaway from just doing even one energy class. Um,
yeah.
mhm, yeah.
Yes, I was saying to Jean before we went live that I had done Richard Bartlett's energy healing course. I hadn't done healing courses for probably 15 years before that, and but I read his book and thought it was interesting. So I went to Melbourne about 10 years ago to do it. He came out to Australia, and I was speaking to people that were doing the courses, and many of them were older and predominantly women. And I said, "Are you going to utilize this? Are you going to use it on start a practice, or do it on your family or your pets or your dogs?" And they said, "Yeah, maybe my pets and my dogs," but they didn't intend to actually utilize it. And I was scratching my head thinking, so why are you doing it, spending all this money and time, if you're not going to actually be a practitioner or help people? And then my mob said to me, the guide said to me, just holding the consciousness is enough to contribute to the collective consciousness and spreading it through the minds of humanity. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like, just people that holding that knowing, like knowing about this stuff is you're doing a service to humanity. Yeah. Yeah. Knowing
Yeah.
and believing in it, like not just knowing in it and being skeptical, but believing in it. Like if you're going to spend thousands of dollars doing an energy healing course, then you've got to believe in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so I think a lot of the like Arcturian work, this intergalactic work, like when I hold a class, I know a lot of people want to be helping people, but maybe the clientele is not really ready to hear that the healing they're about to receive is Arcturian. So I'd say
Right.
you call it what you want, because
Yeah, yeah.
about healing. It's not really about trying to push Arcturian. But for myself, I've never felt that I needed to say call it anything else. And like I never quite answered your question about what it is like. Did I get any flack from the scientific community that I was in?
Yeah.
A big part of, because I never went back. Like I never went back. But I know if I was still in the mindset where I was trying to be accepted by the scientific community and do this, I wouldn't have been able. Most people would probably feel, well, you wouldn't ever be allowed in the door at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just thought, kind of, that was just my soul path. And maybe I had some experiences in past lives where, I could do that kind of move, because I'm not sure if it came in this life to make that kind of just, I don't know if it's called a courageous move, but, like that's there and I'm here and I really don't think about what you're going to think about, because they probably wouldn't be thinking very positively about it. But to have that hold, someone kind of out there, maybe not out there, but for my own particular personal history, when they see Arcturian, that's almost too much of a step for a lot of people, like mainstream, but who are interested in energy or spirituality. But when they see, okay, this person did some of the traditional things that I'm used to, like they did go maybe to like an education that I'm used to, then there's like, okay, there's a bridge there. And I think that everyone has their own particular role of light workers or whoever, all of us trying to move consciousness forward. And I think just that helped.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I was only on reflection now. I didn't really consciously try to do that. But
yeah. Oh, no, that's a huge role. It's the bridge between our allopathic, scientific, three-dimensional way of thinking and our expansive, fourth, fifth dimensional way of thinking and creative, infinite possibility, like what's possible. And I want to remind people that you're listening to Accentuate the Positive Media with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM. So we're syndicated through internet and radio all across the States and Canada, and streaming on 8 different platforms on the internet. We're also on all the audio channels, like Spotify and all those ones. Jean also does a lot of healing work on audio channels. I asked him if he had a podcast. It's not really a podcast, it's more Jean doing activations. And I put the link in the chat. It's on Spotify. So you look up Jean Ang on Spotify and you'll see him doing his activations there. And we are, my guest today obviously is Jean Ang. We're talking energy healing, Arcturian healing. And we were talking before about, seeing it to believe it. I had been given an experience of seeing instant healing, physical instant healing on my poor old daughter's foot. But she got to see it as well, right? Which was, I keep referring back to it when she goes into her limited mindset of can't. And I said, remember that? You didn't think that was possible, remember? And she goes, yeah. And it sort of knocks her out of that limited thinking. So she got to see it as well. But you were talking about bending spoons, and you were saying that you put the white light into the spoon because, in the Matrix, they say you and the spoon are one. Like often people say, you can change reality when you understand that you are one with it. But you were saying white light, and it reminded me of the kids that put the blindfolds on and they see perfectly with their, through their inner eye. They read books and play sports, and not just kids, the adults as well. But they talk about bringing the white light down through their chakra, their crown, and out through their third eye, to actually see with their inner eye, but see like they see with their outer eyes. Have you seen that, Jay?
I haven't seen that, in person, but I know what you're referring to. In particular, I was thinking of there was a documentary on the Chinese, children from China who could like read with their hand. Like they put the blindfold on and they're just feeling the book. They're just reading through their hand. They're maybe actually reading through the third eye too. So, so I haven't seen that level of, clairvoyance, but I have had experiences with clairvoyance, maybe not to that mastery that you're mentioning.
Well, I play with it with my group. I play with it with myself. I've done it and I've not done it. When I've tried to do it, not done it, and then I've done it and I've not done it. But yeah, I remember I was in the shower one day, I had my eyes shut and I wanted to reach for something. And I know there's a memory, but I had this really clear vision, like I was looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it. Just had this minute of doing it in the shower one day. And then I tried to do it again and I couldn't do it. But the kids just seem to do it so easily. But they just say they bring the white light in and then channel it out their third eye. It seems so simple. I guess it is simple, but our ideas of it being different or hard or magical, or our ideas get in the way of making it simple, don't you think? What do you think's going on there?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think with any type of the psychic work, maybe in a different point in time in humanity, the human being was much more they call it the bicameral mind. The two hemispheres were more balanced. I think we're coming back to that. Then we shifted more to what just maybe colloquially it's called the left brain. So to be more logical, language, verbal, and now like what you're saying, maybe everyone listening or what your experience is here, we're beginning to bridge the two hemispheres now, more right-brained, which are all these psychic abilities. So if you get that mental, verbal, kind of logical, chatting mind involved with any of the psychic work, which is sometimes linked to the left brain if you're right-handed and opposite of your left. But it all shuts down.
Yeah, what my guides are saying right now about it, because I have some abilities which are open and flowing, and then when I try things like seeing through your third eyes as clearly as you can see through your physical eyes, I struggle with it, and my guides are saying that's because of my reliance on the physical apparatus. Like you rely on that, and so there's this mindset of relying on it. So when you try to do something different, you sort of naturally go to that default setting. You slip more into that default setting, expecting it to be how you've always known it to be, instead of jumping into a new reality. Yeah. They're showing me how we can do that. And I suppose that is with energy healing as well. Like we go into the default. Like I said, I know a lot of energy practitioners that when they get really sick, they go off and have chemotherapy. And they sort of rely on that instead of jumping into a new reality and trusting it as much as we trust the third dimensional reality. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I was just thinking maybe we could do some healing with people listening today, listening live, and also listening to the recording. Has anyone got a question about energy healing or something that you want to work on? Pop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Is there anything that's coming through from your mob, your galactic guides? Because one of your healing modalities is called InterGalactic Healing. Do you want to explain that? InterGalactic Healing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we were talking about, having this proof, in the physical dimension, but now not for healing, but more so for the interdimensional contact, whether you call those star beings, UFOs, or just interdimensional beings. I mentioned I was trained with Stephen Greer, so he has these different consciousness protocols. And, I went to Mount Shasta to do the training with him, and then Joshua Tree. I think I did 2 in Mount Shasta. And then I started to hold a retreat at Mount Shasta every year, till now. And we had these amazing sightings. They're basically like power-ups of, lights and lights moving around. And then I did the shamanic journeying to one particular year, maybe it was 2017, where just as a group, we were seeing so much in the night sky over consecutive nights. I went and journeyed to, who is the spiritual consciousness behind those sightings. And I did contact a group who I just called the InterGalactics, or that's the term they gave me. They didn't say it was super important, the name. And then they downloaded a healing modality. At first it was just like, one kind of session, one class. And then now it's sort of kind of expanded, just because more people got involved and liked it and wanted to learn sort of more nuances. So there's now like 7 levels of that. So that's basically a group of, I would call it star being consciousness. And I particularly, just because this orientation to healing with different energies or subtle energies. brought through a modality that I call the InterGalactic Healing Modality. And it was kind of sourced at Mount Shasta in California.
Fabulous, fabulous. I want to ask you what else your Arcturian and galactic guides are saying to you, but Hamida has got a question here. I know that she's been struggling with some health issues. So she says, I'd like to work on releasing oxalic acid and related acids from my body.
Yeah, we can. There's a frequency that's coming to mind. It's called from the Arcturian. It's called Arcturian repatterning of cells. Very good for the cellular DNA physical level. So we'll channel some of that. It doesn't really come through me. It just comes directly into people's field, through resonance, quantum field. So of course, other people might have other intentions for it, or you could just let it work what I call quantumly, just wherever it's most needed. Okay, so we'll do a couple minutes of that, and I'll just kind of guide us through that process. So we're starting with the Arcturian repatterning of cells frequency. Particularly, we're clearing the acid contact, the oxalic acid content, and other acids from, it was Hamida.
She's in Sydney, Australia.
And other people who are receiving this can make their own and specific personal intention for where the frequencies are working, or you could just let it work what I call quantumly, because it has the frequencies have their own intelligence, and doesn't really require my voice, but I'll kind of chirp in every so often, so you know.
Yeah, we are on radio, so it's good to listen to something.
In the process. Yeah, they usually work quick, the Arcturian energies, and so that completed itself, and people can come back to their body. If you like, you can snap your fingers just to come back.
Wow, I have to say, doing this with you, Jean, because I have a really strong third eye, I'm seeing so many amazing things. I'm seeing portals and space. I'm seeing this really clear eye, which is related to you, Hamida. But whoa, just like tuning into what you're doing and watching it on a third eye level is fascinating. Yeah, you're the dude. You're the man, galactic man. But when somebody has some acid, so she's got releasing oxalic acid and related acid from the body. Obviously, there's something else going on. Like what? Thanks a lot. So glad to see you live. I think that must be a fan of yours, Jean. But what is the cause of this acid buildup? Because there's a cause to it. It just doesn't happen, not on a physical level, but maybe on a mental, emotional, karmic, causal level. What are you getting about that?
Yeah. What I was thinking is if we were to look at it emotionally or mentally, see it definitely resonating or even causative from that. And usually some type of worry state can really cause that kind of contracted state, usually is causing this sort of acidic body acid, which I think is a big issue actually for many people. It could be very low chronic, kind of keeping us maybe not at our optimal health. And so what I've found is this alkaline state, which of course maybe there's a lot of holistic therapies based on being more alkaline, just maybe through your diet. But I think that's affected directly by your thinking too, and your emotional state. So when you're more like in the flow, kind of relaxed, your energy, if someone were to taste your etheric body, it kind of is less sour, less like astringent. It sort of feels a little bit, even maybe tastes good in their evaluation. So I think that's the more alkaline state. So if we can get into a little bit more of a relaxed consciousness, flowing with the flow, accepting what's showing up, like you said, accepting ourselves, I think that kind of this creates a lot of acid, I think, physically.
So self-acceptance. Because here's the looping that goes on. Jules always talked about looping. I loved having the conversation with Jules. I had her on her show, and obviously I was on her Superhuman Summit. But she talked about these emotional loops, like we have a physical diagnosis or a physical symptom. And if we are in a worried state, now our attention is brought to the worry about how to overcome the physical symptom. And so we're just looping. People say, relax, meditate, love yourself. And then you're worried about your physical status because you're in pain or you're displaying symptoms which are uncomfortable. And so the worry sort of concentrates on that. So do you want to speak to that, Jean? Like, how do people get out of that sort of loop of worrying about their health?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is challenging. I think healers can help break, it's sort of like breaking in LLP, they sort of say break the kind of pattern. And anything can really be a pattern interrupt. But, I think this can't happen, what I'm about to say, like while you're in that, but maybe if you're doing like a constant spiritual study and you realize and you start to have direct experiences that you're not your body, that this is a somewhat like a dream state, like if we think we had our conversation prior to this show, it's a little bit like a dream. It's over. I mean, it's gone. It's like, it's not there anymore. But all of your life is going on like that. Now, you're not going to think about that when you got a hit with a diagnosis of cancer, or diagnosis of, let's say, even a smaller kind of intensity. But if you've been dwelling on that in your consciousness and start to have a lot of, maybe even, like you said, near death, out of body experiences or experiences of your other dimensional selves, the more subtle ones, you can call upon that when something of this nature happens that really starts to make you contract back, to be a pattern interrupt. I think those are the deepest pattern interrupts, is our remembrance of sort of these non-dual experiences.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Hit the nail on the head. Yeah, all our focus goes into the problem. And even as healers, often, I love that you said that you're not a healer, you're a facilitator. I love that, because when I used to call myself healer, and then I realized by calling myself healer, I would take the power away from my clients because they would expect me to heal them. And so then I started calling myself teacher, because I wanted people to learn how to do this for themselves. Yeah, I can show you some stuff, but you're doing it. Like, we can do some healing, but you're the one doing it. You're the one accepting it or not accepting it. You're the one choosing to change. And but yeah, what we do is when we do get sick, or our focus goes into the image of who we are as someone that's sick, and we keep propping that up with our memory, as you say. But do we ever visualize who we are as completely healed? Like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? What does it look like when I am completely healed of this ailment? And putting our focus in that direction rather than trying to heal, trying to constantly heal. We keep focusing on what it is we need to heal, and we keep repatterning it, recreating it. Yeah. Yeah. So that could be something. All right. No questions coming in. So I'm asking you guys listening, if you've got any questions about healing for Jean, this fantastic, amazing healer that we've got online with you today. And if not, maybe we'll just do a collective healing. When you tune into the collective consciousness of humanity, what do you think needs shifting the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still under, like a lot of the star beings, the channel material was this, that kind of was very inspirational when I was starting out, was the fear thought form. I mean, it's still there. I think it's loosened. All this work that you, I, and everyone else here listening have been doing consciously, have been shifting that. But there's a unique frequency the Arcturians kind of downloaded maybe 8 years into, when I was working, bringing through the different levels, called Arcturian freedom frequency. It's kind of very similar to some of these mantras, different esoteric, maybe Buddhist groups or different spiritual groups will say, to kind of release. They kind of sometimes see it as a kind of on the astral level, a little bit like a black energy that's created from humanity, of all the kind of negative fear thoughts forms. So maybe we'll do a little bit of channeling of one or two of these frequencies, and then we can do a couple more just as we're going on here. But it's called Arcturian Freedom Frequency, and it can be just worked with you personally. Since
Nice.
we're all around the world, we'll also do an intention that it kind of releases collective, do a little bit work on the collective fear construct. But people may get a sense of that. Yeah. Okay. And then if you're trying to maybe establish a connection with the Arcturians, this just by kind of feeling this vibration, you may, kind of, it's almost like being given someone's telephone number. Then you can just recall it whenever you want to make a connection.
You can call them anytime.
Right. The AT&T Arcturian. Okay. All right. So so you can just relax. If you have a specific intention, that maybe there is something of worry, or maybe it's money worry, relationship worry, body worry. But let me activate it first. It's called Arcturian Freedom Frequency. So we're starting with the Arcturian Freedom Frequency for everyone, all the consciousness who's listening to the live as well as in the future in the recording. With the Arcturian Freedom Frequency, you can either set an intention, maybe you're trying to create a positive outlook on life. You're trying to accentuate the positive, like we mentioned. So help to put in some Arcturian assistance in that pattern.
Love it.
Can release, dissolve fear patterns. A lot of those that probably are affecting us, our subconscious that we were talking about. Because we'd probably let them go if they were conscious, 100% conscious. We'll go through one deeper cycling of this. So we're continuing with the Arcturian Freedom Frequency. And here if you want, you can also contribute your intention to this idea of a collective fear thought form that's sort of somewhat affecting the planet. We're sort of dissolving that, and the angelic beings, the Arcturians, sort of a little bit like multiply our intention to dissolve that. Just making it easier for people not to be depressed or to wake up happy. Just be in a more positive state, kind of like the weather. Okay, that completed there. If you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes and snap your fingers.
So when you do these activations, downloads, what do we call it? Transmission. There we go. I hit on a word that feels more like what we were just doing. Do you see much going on, or how are you transmitting it?
How do you do that? Yeah, I don't right now. I don't try to even see. I probably could, and then maybe maybe have some images that I would make relevant to from my brain. But I kind of activate these in these transpersonal chakras above our head, like just specifically, like I'll go to the third one above my head and just state I'm activating Arcturian Freedom Frequency, and then I go to the third one below my body. Now that was somewhat created by myself when I connected to the Arcturians. They sort of, maybe there was an agreement, like this is the way you activate it. This is the way you can show other people how to activate it when they get the attunement. And so that's pretty much all I'm doing, almost energetically, mechanistically, to start the frequency.
Yeah. Oh God, I see so much. I was seeing the globe, and I was seeing these energy swirling around the planet, and sort of like sheets of energy sort of lifting off. Sometimes as you see images of the sun, you see all this energy, and then there'll be like this sort of big mass sort of come off. That's a bit like what I was seeing. Not exactly, but a bit like. There's a question here. What are you saying here? apocryphal world records. Am I saying that? Never heard of the apocryphal. Never heard of the Arcturians until a ceremony. The stars became a focal point, and light answered my question. Couldn't find anyone with a relationship with this planet very easily. What does that mean? What does that question mean? Couldn't find anyone with a relationship with this planet very easily. I'm not sure.
Couldn't find anyone with a relationship with this planet very.
I don't think that's.
You mean couldn't find anyone who was connected to the Arcturians? Maybe the Arcturus. It's not a. It's more a star, but sometimes people refer to it as a planet.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe the question.
Maybe it is. They'll have to get back to us. Okay. Hello. Thanks so much for the valuable information. I have a health question. I have on and off pain in my elbows and hands. Do you have any input for working with it? Thanks so much.
Oh yeah.
From remote Marion. I'd love it if you say your real name, just because it's like an energy signature of who you are as this personality in this lifetime, and we can sort of get more of a hold on, like a tune into that energy rather than like a YouTube name that you've had, because that's like something that you've made up. It's not how you identify yourself as. So that helps, I think, when tuning into people specifically. What do you think, Jean?
Oh yeah. I think particularly it sounds like she or he
Marion.
is receptive, Marion. So that receptive, it would probably be very helpful. But a frequency did come to mind when she wrote. So it's called Arcturian high frequency light. So we can channel that. I think people really enjoy that in general too, and it's very very powerful or strong. So we'll do that for Marion.
And anybody else that wants Arcturian high frequency light. And what does the Arcturian high frequency light do specifically?
Well, it's like I call it like a 3.0 Arcturian. So like when the methods, when it came out, we started with something called Arcturian high healing light. And then more and more people kind of, took the class or started working with it. So it created a stronger morphic field. And then there was something in the middle of the levels called Arcturian upper echelon frequencies. And so people use that. And then, so I think, with the dimensional beings, the more you establish something here that's been used, that's physicalized, then they can bring something that's relevant, that's of a higher level, because now there's something to land on. So, so this is the link. Yeah. Okay. So it's a kind of a very open. It works on all dimensional levels for healing specifically. Okay, so you can be with just relax, and we'll start the Arcturian high frequency light. And like I said, it can work on the physical, etheric, emotional, mental, causal, spiritual, and divine level. And for Marion, we'll work specifically to balance or heal her elbows, wrists, joints. Continuing to channel the Arcturian high frequency light. Also, everyone who's listening, also if you know someone's receptive and would give you permission and they need healing, you can also just think about them. The energies will also go to them also. So people might have a loved one who's in the hospital or in need of healing. Or some kind of assistance, maybe just a little positive boost, move them in the right direction. All right, and that completed that session.
Beautiful.
They work fast.
They work fast. You know what? We look for proof as humans, but I've seen so much proof occur in this sort of energy matrix manifest in the physical world, in people's attitudes changing, in workshops and just having conversations where you have an argument with someone and maybe they haven't called you for a time, and then instead of seeing them or thinking about them with the argument, you think about how much you love and appreciate them and think about them, you know, in golden loving light. And then the next day they call you, or in the afternoon they call you, and they've had a complete change of mind. Like, there is just so much evidence that we can use, like with our thinking, because thinking is in the realm, it's the causal realm. Like the Arcturians say to me, they're masters of mind. We're in that energy realm. That's what thinking is. Thank you. Brilliant. Very strong, Marianne says.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, so just by changing our thinking, we're changing the energy, our energy field, right? And often we just get stuck in these beliefs and loops that this is the way the world is. But we can change, you know, what did Wayne Dyer say? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Like, we are magical beings.
Oh, yeah.
We are magical beings, and the way we think and feel is an indication of our magic. So when we're thinking about ourselves as sick, as I was saying before, often when we have a diagnosis, we keep thinking about this as our identity instead of thinking about ourselves as well, or any ailment. If we're overweight, thinking about what it feels like to be a better weight, or thinking about what it feels like to feel fitter, or like using that realm of energy through thought to manifest or inspire us to get what we want. And Kai says here, so I had an off-world experience and my energy became connected with Arcturus, and I questioned this energy source if I would again be an accepted guest. I don't know what you're asking here, Kai. Are you asking to be a guest on the show or a guest in the Arcturian Star Nation system?
Sounded like Arcturians, if you could go back again to the Arcturus connection.
So there's a couple of questions coming in. Someone has Cameron has a problem with swallowing. Can this be healed? And Carol says, any frequency to help me improve sleep? Thank you. I think with a lot of these, like, we focus on the symptoms, like I can't sleep, or I have this pain, or I have this itch, or I have this rash. But the frequencies that you're talking about, Jean, sort of are an overall, they sort of cover all of it, don't they? Like, you don't have to do a different frequency for every different little ailment. You can just go and work with the Arcturian healing frequencies and it can cover it. Yeah, what do you want to say to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the model is more like, speaking of Richard Bartlett and matrix energetics, I like the quantum, model, like very similar to reconnection, and this idea that, we may collapse the field, or so to speak, or collapse the wave into something we very specifically call a symptom, whether it's the sleep or, my throat or the foot. And, I work with that just because, that's how a lot of people will be showing up and asking. But like exactly what you said, I think the larger model, which can kind of be in the background or in kind of the consciousness of the healer or the recipient, is that, the divine and these frequencies, they work holistically. They're going to work in, even that model I suggested, the 7 dimensions. You could work with 4 dimensions of a person, or you could have a bigger model. It works all over. And, like we just pointed out, maybe an acidic, expression of our blood or in our, physical body, has a deeper or resonant cause on the emotional, mental body, which we discussed. So these frequencies, and I think the Arcturian consciousness, they'll work with you even if you do see things more through one specific lens, but they're probably working at all of those dimensions simultaneously. That's probably true to what's energetically happening.
They would have to, because it's all connected. Like, you're affecting one system, one energy system. It's affecting every other system. It's the same with the body. Deepak used to talk about that. He would say to his esteemed scientific colleagues that said that there was no mind-body connection. Can you prove a mind-body connection? And he said, well, if there's no mind-body connection, how do you wiggle your toes? Like, if you think about wiggling your toes and then wiggle your toes, like, everything is connected. And but I think that when we can talk, I very much talk on the mental, emotional levels when speaking with people. It's something that we can understand as humans. Like, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? And that's connected to all the other bodies. That's affecting your physical body, your etheric body, your astral body, like it's connected to all the other bodies, causal, karmic. And so when you can heal it on one level, it will sort of heal through all the rest, don't you think?
Oh yes, yes. It's actually kind of resonating. Everything is, it's actually probably one, and we kind of are using something
Right.
to really get our hands around it, which is very helpful. But it is still a model of more the whole pie.
Well, we've got 6 minutes left, and as I said, I'm going to post that link again that Jean shared with me. There's a lot of where is it? Private chat. Here we go. There's a lot of healing activations that he does on his what he calls his podcast show. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. Where's chat? Here we go. I'm going to post it in the chat, which you can listen to on Spotify. They're on audio podcasts. So if you want to tune into some of his frequencies, and if you do have problems, pain in your body or symptoms showing, if you tune into his frequencies and downloads that he's doing, and ask for that to be cleared up on all levels of your being, or I'm sure it'll happen, and let us know how you go. 5 minutes left, Jean. Anything you want to say to people before we finish the live?
Oh no, I think this shift in consciousness that's occurring, like that you're assisting in a very huge way with this with your show here is amazing. Like I was mentioning, like I listened to some of your previous shows 12 years ago, and just to see how things are, changing in the energy world, the fact that we're talking, maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25, just to make it conservative, there might not have been as many shows like this, or even a show like this. And so, we didn't get so much to talk about the different interdimensional UFO type phenomena, but I think that's also, like I said, my perception of the beings, which would include the Arcturians, but is that as they're not trying to disrupt our life, and so there's a certain amount of consciousness that has to sort of show up.
I had an aha moment when you said that a lot of the sightings, especially when you do CE5s like you did with Stephen Greer and stuff, a lot of the sightings are an opportunity to download codes into people that are actually on the planet as star beings, as star seeds or healers or teachers, to activate them in remembering who they are and why they're here. So I was thinking, whoa, it's not so much about like, we're going to prove we exist, so we're going to blink at you in the night sky, but we're going to send a frequency into your human brain that is under the river of oblivion and have you remember your star lineage and your connection to your multidimensional self and your infinite creative possibility and potential. So that was a real aha moment for me. So I was like, yeah, they're blinking at us for many reasons, not just to say, hello, we're here.
Exactly.
They're beaming transmissions down to awaken us. So that was cool. That was very cool. Yeah. But we don't need to see them for that to happen. Like, we don't need to sit under the stars and see them. But I've got a story. If we've got 3 minutes to go, my skeptical daughter, she was a few years ago, she was looking after a house in the country, and I went and stayed with her, and I said, let's go and sit under the stars. And she said, oh, do you want to call the UFOs? And I said, no, it'd just be nice to sit under the stars. And there was this humongous flash of white light in the sky, not lightning. Wow. And we both went, whoa, because it sort of lit up the whole sky for like an instant and then went back in. It sort of went out and came back in. It was amazing, like a cosmic flashlight. And we were both stunned again. And I said, see, told you they were real.
Yeah.
But again, it might have been a transmission for me and her at that point. It might have like what it did to us in that moment. Yeah, who knows? Oh, Jean, it's been so, I'd love to have you back and we can talk about this further. We can go more into the galactics. But this has been such a blessing and a beautiful healing journey today. And for people that didn't catch the whole show, go back to the recording and listen to it or watch it, because there's been lots of amazing healing energy today. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and blessing us.
Thanks.
And being on the planet.
And everyone else. That was great.
And thanks everybody for tuning in and listening and for your questions. And be sure to tune in to some of the frequencies that Jean is bringing through, especially Cameron said he had a problem with swallowing. So, yeah, tune into that and see how you go. And what have we got left here? And we will catch you for the next show. I don't know who I've got coming up on the show next week, but yeah, since I've been on this UFO United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network syndicated radio on 107.7 and 105.3, I've just been booked out for the rest of the year, like without even people knowing about it. People have just been inundated, because last year I was just at my wit's end and thinking, I'm just going to stop the show. I've been doing it for long enough now. And then Preston and Dolly said, come on this radio network. And things just were winding down, things just wound up again. It's like amazing what happens when you have an intention to put out there. Where are we? What have we got left? Thank you again. Big love to you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Karen. This was great. And
I'll see you next time. And Jean's website is arcturianhealingmethod.com. Bye for now.
Bye.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
Clap along if you feel like that's what you want.